Hi, welcome to the fourth and final portion of our series on mental health in partnership with Foster County Office of Education. Tonight we will be talking about substance use and other self-harming behaviors and other issues that come up. My name is Tom Hare. I am the program director for Auburn Davis Center for DBT. I have been working in mental health since 2007 or so. And I have been working as a therapist since about 2011. Um, what else? I've been working with DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, for the last 5 or 6 years, and specifically with Auburn Davis Center for DBT for the last 3 years or so, treating kids with a history of all kinds of behavioral disorders, including self-harming and substance use. A lot of my background comes from the substance use and recovery programs. And so I'll be really excited to share about some of those things and just provide some education about what's kind of going on and how, from a DBT lens, we treat and how we address substance use. Tonight, before we get started, I would love to go over mindfulness. We do a mindfulness component before all of our sessions as part of DBT, and we're just going to get into all this. So, for my purposes, I define mindfulness as the non-judgmental focusing of one's attention, both inward and outward. So this is my definition. I don't know if anybody else's. I can't say it's unique or that it is uniquely better than any one. It's the one that I use because I find it's the most useful for me to be able to kind of deal with this stuff and to learn the aspects of mindfulness. All right, so today we are going to do what's called a body scan. So we're going to start by just closing our eyes and take a few deep breaths. Allow yourself to relax completely. Visualize a warm, comforting light enveloping your body, starting from from the crown of your head and slowly moving down to your toes. As light moves through you, imagine it is scanning every part of your body, gently releasing any tension or discomfort it encounters. Pay attention to any sensation or feelings that arise as you undergo the scan. Take your time and allow yourself to fully experience the healing energy flowing through you. Continue to let that light scan through as you're paying attention to each of the sensations and feelings as they arise. Also, allow them to fade to the background as the light continues to flow, to scan down your body. Let the light scan all the way down until eventually it reaches your toes. And bring your awareness back to us and to the conversation. So getting into DBT and substance use disorders. Substance use disorder is an impulse control problem. Somebody develops a reliance on a substance and the way that it makes them feel. Sometimes it is they are seeking a pleasurable feeling. Oftentimes, though, they end up simply trying to avoid the painful feelings of the withdrawals. And so we see it's really is an issue of how do I control my impulses so that I don't continue down a path or don't continue in behaviors that are really just not helpful for me. Um, the use is most often a coping strategy for emotion dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation can be anything from anxiety to depression to feelings of just being unable to focus. It's not uncommon to self-medicate for those who have ADHD, even those with things like autism or other things. The feeling of dis-ease around being around people or feeling like they are not part of a group or not accepted can be very triggering. And so just having a chance um, to cope with that, and they use this as a way to escape or to ease the feelings just a little bit. Additionally, um, the substances can be a great lowest common denominator for making friends. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of kids, I worked for a good portion of my practice working with foster youth who had been moved around quite a bit, which means that unfortunately means they also move their schools and have to get new friends. One of the things that I find very common is that it's really easy to make friends over smoking, over using. It is a point of commonality where they don't have to try to make a team. They don't have to dress a certain way. They don't have to test out the situation. The connection of, oh, you smoke, I smoke, can be a really great place as a starting point for a new friendship. It doesn't tend to get much deeper than that, so they do end up feeling oftentimes still quite lonely. And it's a way to deal with the immediate problem of I'm a new kid, I don't know where I belong, and I don't know how to connect with someone. Then DBT, our skills are a great adjunct or addition to what addicted people or what people who suffer from addiction learn in NA, Narcotics Anonymous, or Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're unfamiliar with those are 12-step programs that really focus on sobriety and a life of recovery. Um, the difference between sobriety and recovery being the sobriety is just simply I'm not using. Recovery is really taking on and adhering to a new way of living. And so to not be too crass, but one of the jokes from the 12-step programs that I heard was what do you call an alcoholic without alcohol? And the answer is an asshole. Because oftentimes it's not just the alcohol that's been the problem. They have developed a pattern of living that is very difficult. And again, it's because they oftentimes lack the skills to be able to get their needs met in other ways. And so DBT skills are a great addition to these 12-step programs. There is a very high prevalence of emotional reactivity within the substance use disorder population. Emotional reactivity, for those who have not listened or were not able to attend the previous sessions, emotional reactivity is just a way of talking about the things that lead to things like anxiety and or substance use. Reactivity looks like somebody who is easily triggered, somebody who, when they're triggered, they have a higher than expected response, and because of that higher than expected response, they have a really long cooldown or return to baseline. Um, we see that for these people, substance use and substances are a great way to manage those emotions and to gain some control in their life. So there really are two kind of polarities or extremes in terms of the treatment of substance use disorders. The first one is the abstinence only model. This is the one that is the tried and true 12-step AA model. It has a lot of strengths to it. It does refrain from all substances, and so that then allows for the ability to really reframe and retrain the brain and to get away from addictive personality styles and problems. It also has the downside of it's a very high bar to reach and can be very hard to maintain. Harm reduction is the model is about reducing the harm of the substances, and rather than vilifying them or demonizing them and saying that all substances are bad all the time, it says um, a little's okay, or a little is better than more, and we definitely don't want to have too much. And so those are kind of the two main approaches out there, and we'll talk about both of them a little bit more in depth. With the abstinent only model, there are definitely pros. There are increased length of time to use, and being able to just be able to really clear the brain and to reset the brain. Um, is also that oftentimes that we kind of need to burn bridges. We have to avoid cues in high risk situations for our addictive behaviors. And the absence only model allows for us to do that. It can be very hard for somebody who is really addicted to alcohol to quit drinking if they're not fully abstinent and they are still going to places where alcohol is available to them. If you are taking a abstinence only approach, then you limit your access to the substance, which then makes it just more likely that you will be successful in maintaining that. One of the big secrets to forming a habit is really about managing the access to that habit. The less accessible it is, the more likely you are to be able to avoid that habit. The more accessible it is, the more likely you are to continue to access it. And so with absence only models, we really do increase the distance and decrease the accessibility of the substances by saying, no, we're not going to use anything, and we're not going to be places that are going to be serving them or that may be a high risk for it, so that I am not tempted or tripped up. One of the big cons, though, is something called the abstinence violation effect. So, as you are counting your days sober, it can be very disheartening when you violate that abstinence by taking even just a sip or even just a puff. With that, once you violate your abstinence, it's very common for people to get what are called the buckets. Um, and again, excuse the language, but this is common thinking within the addiction community of F it. I've already drank, I already violated my abstinence. I might as well go big. And so then they will use at a very high level again. Um, this can also be very dangerous because they will try to return to their previous using level, and because they may have been abstinent for quite some time, their tolerance is very different. Additionally, what we're seeing um, in more present times is that there's the issue of the drugs are very different than they were even just a few years ago. So, weed has become stronger and stronger. Um, Back in the 1970s, it was, I believe, 8% THC was the amount. Nowadays, it is uncommon, or it's actually very common to have weed with 25% THC or even higher. And there are edibles and other forms of cannabis that can be upwards of nearly 100% THC. That's a very different effect than an 8% bong or joint hit, and so that can have a big effect on them. The other thing is with opiates, the introduction of fentanyl has been a game changer. Whereas before they would cut heroin with other things in order to spread out the stuff, and even that could be dangerous if you got a poorly cut or a differently cut version of the heroin. Nowadays they're using fentanyl, and fentanyl is so much more potent than other opiates that it's very easy to get to a point of an overdose. And so that can be the different con side is that somebody comes back and they're not they're not really aware of the changes that have happened since they may have been absent and because they have been abstaining, and it leads to an overdose and even a death. Uh, it also really doesn't pay much attention to our capacities for coping with failures of self-control. Um, Nobody's perfect in their self-control. If you think you are, I would highly challenge you to look, because we all have our areas where we act in ways that are not necessarily in line with our values or what's best for us. Um, Without the skills or the tools to be able to navigate this, it can be very hard. And it then also because there can be this moral liking that can come with it, even though the 12-step programs are actually very clear about it is a disease and not something that should be seen as a moral decision. Our harm reduction model, on the other hand, focuses on teaching moderation and skills. Resuming goals more quickly after a slip and relapse is not as long or as harmful. Usually they're still within the community, and so they're aware of any changes that have happened to the substances. And there's not been such a drastic drop in tolerance where a lapse is not quite so dangerous. Uh, the flip side, the con, is the moderation effect. If you expect that the using is not so bad, then you'll use less time. Then you'll use less time to stop the drug use. And so that can it can be a very slippery slope. We have been doing experiments across the nation. The biggest one is the state of Oregon, where they decriminalized basically all substances, and they have not really had a very good effect by moderating the viewpoints, by taking away the some of the appropriate stigma of substance use. We open the door and it can kind of green light things. And so there does seem to be that there needs to be some balance between um, a push for change and as well as accepting that people are going to choose to use. People are going to choose to drink and do other things, and we want to help them do so safely. And so, just being able to work with those things and address those things can be very important. Along with the harm reduction model, there's also a lot less judgment that comes into all this. The moralizing is really taken out of it. There's also, at least for me, there is a congruence with the fact. Um, I can't tell somebody who is just smoking weed that they're going to ruin their life. They might ruin their life. Chances are they're not. Also, the research shows weed is not a gateway drug. It's that's a long-standing myth, and it's not, smoking weed is actually not a very good predictor for future or more intense substance use. Um, just because people who do use often start with something like weed does not mean that all people who smoke weed are at risk of going to harder substances. And so, really, kind of getting your facts straight and being in line and in congruence with the facts makes your arguments, makes your conversations more palatable. If you just sit there and you demonize weed or cannabis, your child's gonna be very resistant to it because they're like, that this is just not what I understand, or this is not the reality of what I'm experiencing. So our synthesis is we want to explicitly or from the front of mind have the expectation of trying to reduce and hopefully even eliminate the substance use while also having the implicit back of the mind relapse prevention plan or and also plan for relapse when or if you do relapse, what are you going to do? How do you not make it worse? How do you do so safely? We really try to balance out these things because we want to have a plan both for um, helping them to quit and having an expectation that they can and that they will quit, while also being able to fall back and make sure that they don't just continue to make mistakes and that they know what to plan for when they do make a mistake. Um, this is the idea of the touchdown every time mentality versus winning isn't everything mentality, right? So, and we really want to balance that out. We can't expect a touchdown every time. That's not how games are played. You're not always going to score a goal. You're not always going to hit a home run. You really do have to be willing to put in the time and effort and go through the grind. On the flip side, though, we have to recognize that we're sometimes going to lose. And if when we lose, we take our ball and we go home, then that's actually the more harmful of actions. And so we really want to make sure that we are being cautious in how we're approaching things and really trying to balance out our approaches. So we are balancing our total absence with harm reduction. This may look like asking people to use less, to be more mindful of their use. Oftentimes, substance use is a mindless activity. I just start smoking, I just start drinking, and I stop tracking or I stop keeping track. And so being able to just even be mindful of their use can be a great way to reduce it. We're also building alliance with them so that they can choose to stop using on their own. Um, one of the common analogies used within the substance use recovery programs is the relationship with the substance of choice or with substances in general can feel very much like a dysfunctional romantic relationship. And it's actually kind of a better perspective for some people because a lot of people have more exposure to that in their lives or to in their friends' lives than maybe to substance use. And with those, you'll know you can't just talk badly about about the person who you think is an ill fit for your friend, right? If you say that they're bad, you say that they are no good, you talk about them not being, worthy or whatever, what you find is that the other person becomes very defensive of that reaction, and that can actually make them choose them over choosing your friendship, and that can actually set things back quite a bit. So being able to let them really kind of work through their own relationship as it stands and understand, what are the things that are going to make me want, or what are the things that are going to have me change, right? And let me come to my own decisions about things in terms of what's good for me, what's not good for me. So again, it's trying to withhold that judgment and let them kind of work through it themselves. And just as with those bad romantic relationships, when they do break up with a person, you gotta hold back the judgments that you've been holding on to for so long because it's not uncommon that they go back to the person at least once or twice. I think the statistics are it takes 9 attempts for somebody to leave an abusive relationship, although that's kind of a high level kind of issue there. But to be able to really choose that I'm going to give up my substance use and those kind of things, that's a very big action for them. And so being able to um, let them have that choice, let them have that feeling of autonomy so that they can make their own decisions is really important for this. So we look at how do we get to abstinence and to recovery. We do that through what we call the clear mind. This is going to sound a little weird, but we actually want to combine our clean mind with our addict mind to get to the clear mind. The the clean mind is the mind that we have when we're sober. It's the one that recognizes that the substances really aren't very good for us, and that it's coming at a pretty high cost, whether it be to our relationships, to school, to work, all those kind of areas, and really just trying to figure out like, or it's the part of us that knows, yeah, this is probably not the best thing for me. On the flip side, we have the addict mind. The act mind is the mind that is conniving and trying to get to the substances, the one that is very much in love or that is set on continuing to use. The reason why we want to get to it though is that if you're just in clean mind, you oftentimes don't pay attention to the things that may be triggering. And so being able to navigate through those things and to miss those red flags because you're not thinking that way anymore, right? You are back in your hometown and your clean mind thinks, oh, I've been clean and sober for 6 months, a year, what have you. I don't need to worry about being re-triggered. The active mind is very aware that you're back home and knows the places that you probably should avoid, right? And so you want to listen to it, not so much to do what it says, but to know where the pitfalls are, to know where the risks are, and where you really need to be diligent in how you're navigating so that you don't make a mistake. Um, so the idea of overcoming addiction is really is like fighting a long war. Right? The urge once we win a battle is to say that the war is over. The clean mind is all about forgetting the war once those few battles are won. The addict mind is the one that keeps the war present in our mind. It keeps us present and aware that there's a war going on and that um, that support is needed, that things are necessary, that sacrifice might be necessary to win the war. And I think even if you can look at current events and the wars in Ukraine and Afghanistan and Iraq, um, we have a tendency to want to forget the things that are going on, or that our mind begins to move on, or media, or again, find your reason for why that happened. um, the act mind really keeps that at the forefront of like, no, there's still something going on here. We need to pay attention to it. We need to plan for it. We need to figure out how do we continue to support it. And that's why the clear mind is the combination of the clean mind and the addict mind. So how do we get to that clear mind? First, we have to decrease our substance use. You cannot engage your clean mind if you are never clean. If you're awake and bake, if you're always drunk, if you're always using, you're not in a clean state. So you have to at least decrease the substance use. It doesn't mean that you have to abstain. Abstinence may not be the place that you get to at first. So, but you need to at least be able to decrease it so that you have more and more access to the clear mind. Uh, we want to decrease physical discomfort from abstaining. This might be through the assistance of doctors, through a program of detoxification. There are several forms of detoxing that can actually be life-threatening. Severe drinking can lead to physical dependence, and the lack of drinking can lead to what's called a DT, delirium tremens. Delirium tremens is a potentially fatal form of seizure that can happen from the lack of alcohol in a alcoholic system. And so we need to work on addressing that. The other one is opiates. Opiate withdrawal can be life-threatening as well. And so with those, we are actually doing an assisted detoxification by giving them and weaning them off of the substances that they are withdrawing from, so that the withdrawals are not so drastic. We need to decrease our urges and cravings to use. It's going to have to be done through a lot of different ways. We got to be able to navigate those urges and cravings. And we also need to know what causes them and address those underlying behaviors or those underlying causes. Um, if you're lonely all the time and that's what makes you crave alcohol or crave a substance, then you need to work on how do you not be lonely. If you are using because your friends are all using, then you might need to work on finding new friends or finding new social opportunities. If you're using because you're depressed, we need to deal with the depression or deal with the anxiety so that you're not continuing to self-medicate. We need to decrease capitulating to the use of drugs. So the urge to use is going to come up, and um, we need to be aware and to work on decreasing giving in to that urge to go use. We need decreased options, contacts, and cues to those drugs. In some cases, that means we need to burn bridges. We have to lose numbers. We have to insult people. We have to take other steps to get people to change, and that can be really hard. Um, giving Again, looking at the analogy of substances being like a romantic relationship, um, going through a split up can be very much like a divorce, and you're not just breaking up that relationship, you're breaking up the entire family, right? You're giving up the in-laws, although that may be a good thing for some of you. For others, that may be the only healthy family that you've ever had. Or that may be the only connection you have in the immediate area. Maybe you moved from out of state or even out of country, and maybe you have no biological family around. You get divorced, you're then in an area where you may not have the same kind of supports. Same thing with substance use. When I give up weed, when I give up alcohol, when I give up the substance, and the people I connected with, I connected to them because I use, then that could be really problematic. And it could make it very hard for us to navigate and to sustain our sobriety or to sustain our movement towards health, because we're having to give up just so much. So we have to work on decreasing those contacts. We want to increase our community reinforcement of clear mind behaviors. This can be really hard because the people in our life who do reinforce us could be very frustrated with us and have a lot of judgments around our behaviors and just a sense of you want me to applaud you for doing the things you're just supposed to do. And yes, we are looking for that because when they're in the addict's mind, they weren't doing those things. And if you want to increase the behavior, you have to reinforce it. Reinforcement is defined as doing something that encourages or that makes the behavior more likely to happen again. So if you want them to continue to be responsible, you have to reinforce it. Or at least if you want to be more likely they're going to do it again. So DBT skills for substance use, avoiding and eliminating cues to use. This might be tricky behaviors. This might be as drastic as moving and going to a new area, to a new scene, so that you are not having so many different opportunities um, to feel compelled to use, and just being able to go through those kind of things and um, develop new habits. Our habits are really very much uh, connected to our past. Um, Additionally, there is burning bridges or cutting off your drug use options to keep your options for a decent life open. There's urge surfing, where we are learning to not give into the urge while recognizing the urge is not just going to go away right away. Something called alternate rebellion, satisfying our wish to rebel without destroying our life. For some of us, that urge to rebel is really strong, and it becomes a need. You should be able to feel like we have autonomy, that we have control in our life. And so we'll look at different ways, and I'll actually give some examples of alternate rebellion. Finally, you have to build a life worth living. It can't just be about what you're trying to avoid. You have to look at what you're trying to build. So avoiding and eliminating cues of substitutes can cause unbearable urges. That place that you use all the time, the friend that you always use with, all those different things, and they build up until the urge is so strong that you can't help but give in. And so learning to avoid those cues so that you're not having so many urges, so that the urges are not piling up on you to a uncontrollable extent. All of us can resist our urges. All of us can even do opposite of our urges. And at a certain level, when the urges are intense enough, you will give in to your urges. Early in recovery, you may need to take steps to avoid cues. It's great to be able to go through life and deal with triggers and deal with cues, and not react to them or not have to give in to them. When you're early in your recovery, you are so fragile, that may not be possible. And so you have to develop and you have to be committed to doing things differently until you have the strength back. Um, Early recovery is really brittle, and so you have to recognize the fragility of it. One way we do that, we have to burn bridges. So relationships are often developed and maintained around the substance use. Again, we all smoke together, we all use together, we all drink together, and that becomes our commonality. We may enjoy watching football or talking crap about work or our spouses or our parents, in the case of teenagers, or school. And really, the crux of the relationship is around substance use, and when that is taken away, it can really be a hard time maintaining those connections. This becomes like a crabs in a pot situation where one crab could actually crawl out of the pot and get away from the boiling water or from the heat. Unfortunately, the other crabs grab it and pull it back down over and over and over again. This isn't done because they're malicious. They're not trying to hurt the other crab. They're just acting out of instinct. When you put crabs in a pot and turn on the heat, they have an instinctive desire to get away from the heat because they don't want to die. And so they do what they can to get away from the heat, and they reach out for the thing that is above them or away from the heat. They're not trying to pull the other crab down. They're not trying to hurt it. They're just trying to take care of themselves, and they end up injuring the other crab and really confining both of them to a life in the pot, by doing that. Changing relationships will be required at some point. Either you have to change the things that you're into and the things that you connect on, or you're gonna have to change the relationship. Not all relationships are destined to be lifelong. Most relationships are destined to be only for a season of life. And that can be really hard and really sad, and it is an unfortunate truth. Urge surfing, urges to use will come up, especially as emotions. Anger, sadness, fear. These are really strong emotions that are associated with substance use, oftentimes, and that then get us into a cycle of mood dependent behavior. Because I'm anxious, I then use a substance. Well, I become dependent on that substance, and so whenever I don't use it, my anxiety gets out of control. I haven't learned to actually control my anxiety. I'm simply medicating it. And so then I get stuck into this pattern of mood dependent behavior of I feel this way, so I must do this. Feel this way, so I must do this. And we do that over and over and over again. So being able to surf that urge and know it will go up and it will come down and it will eventually subside. This is really where the adage comes up, this too shall pass. Nobody stays addicted, or nobody stays in an urge forever. Nobody stays depressed forever. Nobody stays anxious forever. Our brain at some point recognizes this isn't actually a danger. There's something that's not operating right in this. And so it will begin to reset. And that oftentimes takes sitting in that place of discomfort for quite a while. Adaptive denial is denial and where we are dealing with denial as a common reaction to the struggles. This is where we are actually trying to utilize it adaptively rather than destructively, right? Again, I love sayings and expressions. Um, Denial is not just a river in Egypt. If I go way back in the day, um, denial is what keeps us stuck. We don't address things, we don't deal with things if we can't admit that there's first a problem. That's the first step to fixing anything is to admit that there's a problem. And so we have to figure out how to work through all that. And sometimes denial is adaptive. Um, Denying and pushing away my urges, my substance use, my recovery, when I'm busy doing something that really does make it impossible for me to act on it, can be very helpful. If I spend my entire life, my 24/7 thinking about how I'm going to stay sober, then all I'm focusing on is my substance use. And we run into what's called the pink elephant problem. Pink elephant problem is something as simple as if I tell you, don't think about pink elephants. Do not think about pink elephants. Whatever you do, do not think about pink elephants. I bet you're both thinking about pink elephants right now. Because we can't just be stuck in what we're not trying to do. And so, what adaptive denial sometimes does for us is it gives us relief from thinking about the pink elephant because there are no pink elephants. And if we're in a safe spot, or if we're in an inaccessible spot to our substances, then we can actually use denial and it can be very helpful. Next, we have adaptive rebellion. Adaptive rebellion is all about uh, learning to get through a situation and find other ways to meet our need for rebelling. And so we look at what are some ways that I can rebel that are socially acceptable. This might be in how we dress. It might be in the way our hair is cut. This might be in the the jobs or occupations that we pursue. There are people who are politically active who are basically paid rebels. They're paid to push back against things, to push back against systems, or to push back against the culture and to change things. And so to find a way to meet that need to rebel. There are so many different ways to rebel, and it really comes down to an idea of mindset. Can we identify how we might be being rebellious? Because there are a lot of things that the culture tells us to do, and we actually honestly don't probably do most of it. And the ways that we also think about rebelling can sometimes be very conforming to the idea of what rebellion looks like. And so just alternative rebellion is about expanding the idea of what rebellion looks like. We're going to validate the need and find a better outcome. All right, I got a video next.
You know, I really admire the way you don't care what anyone thinks. You just do what you want the way you want.
So you went to Hopkins for both undergrad and med school?
That's right.
He's in a band.
You into music?
Totally. What kind of music do you play?
Mostly blues, you know. James Cotton, some original stuff.
Dude, you are so hired.
Really?
Not a chance.
Why?
Tattoo.
Wow. Thought you'd be the last person to have a problem with nonconformity.
Nonconformity, right. I can't remember the last time I saw a 20-something kid with a tattoo of an Asian letter on his wrist. You are one wicked free thinker. You want to be a rebel? Stop being cool. Wear a pocket protector like he does and get a haircut. Like the Asian kids who don't leave the library for 20-hour stretches. They're the ones who don't care what you think. Sayonara.
So should I go through all the resumes looking for Asian names?
Actually, the Asian kid's probably just responding to parental pressure, but my point is still valid.
So you see, there are different ways to find rebellion than the stereotypical way than just substance use. And so finding just that niche, right? And the character in there points out that there you can rebel by doing the things the kind of common way. There's also rebellion even in doing the things that might look like it's not rebellion, because it's just choosing who are you rebelling against, who are you, whose opinion does not are you trying to say doesn't matter, and trying to really push back against that. So building a life worth living is about avoiding the pink elephant problem that I just kind of talked about. It's about focusing on what do you want your life to actually look like, rather than what do you not want your life to look like. This can be really hard for people who they have lost kind of the ability to think about those things. They're so stuck in the muck and mire that they really don't have an idea of where they want to go or what they want to do. So we want to build a life worth living. So what do what do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your work to look like? What are the things that you're going to do for fun? Where are you going to live? I have people who are don't like the sun. The sunshine makes them irritable as you can possibly believe. And so their goal for life is they want to move somewhere where it's not so sunny. And so they're looking at places like Oregon, like Washington, and they're looking to move because their life worth living is in a place that is not sunny so much. To me, that sounds horrible. That's not my life worth living. My life worth living is my life worth living. And so we have to allow for people to develop with their own sense of what's going to make them have a life that they actually want to live. Uh, this really does work on increasing our motivation because there's now something to strive for, and this brings meaning to our suffering. Suffering without meaning is the worst kind of suffering, and it's stuff that we will not tolerate. We will refuse to go through and put up with a with feelings of suffering when it is just not. There's no reason for it. And so being able to experience that, right, and to find a reason, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this pain? The analogy I like to use is working out. If you work out for no reason, you won't work out for very long. We tend to work out for very set reasons. Um, one of them is health, right? I want to lose weight. I want to have a better heartbeat. I want to decrease my blood pressure. I need to get control of my diabetes or, any number of things, right? In terms of our health. It can be social pressures. I work out because I get together with my friend at that time and they're expecting me. And so I need to be able to go with them, and I'm going to let them down if I don't. Um, we work out for effects. When I work out, I feel better. I feel less depressed. I wake up. Um, I sleep better at night. There, knowing why I'm putting myself through that suffering of the working out. And if you're working out right, you're doing some suffering. That's all going to be very helpful. Some attachment strategy, we assume that engaging the reluctant client in treatment is the therapeutic task for a DBT therapist. We do not look for the client to come in fully ready and willing to go and all set on moving forward uh, with their sobriety. Many of the clients that I have no intention and no desire to quit their substance use. It's not for them to come in with the motivation. My job is to understand what is it that they want for life and then to reflect back to them what is it that they're doing and is it actually helping them to get there. For a lot of them, substance use is a major impact and a major barrier to them being able to live a happy and fulfilling life, a life that they find worth living. DBT assumes that engaging reluctant, as opposed to a client requirement before starting treatment. So a lot of places say, we don't want you to come here unless you want to be here, or unless you want to be in recovery, unless you want to be sober. We want the client to be present and to be um, willing to come to therapy because it really isn't fun if they're not, and really isn't all that effective if they're not. We also don't expect them though to always be in alignment with what we ourselves are wanting or what we think is best as a therapist. They're going to have their own opinions, they're going to have their own ideas, and that needs to be respected. And by going through their process and coming to the conclusion themselves, they will be happier and they will be more motivated to take on the task that's ahead of them. Quick pause. Any questions about substance use, skills, how this affects anything? I didn't get into any of the details on the actual substances, but I can do a quick run through with that if that would be helpful. Just wanted to pause because we'll move into self-harm next. You can also put it in the chat if you would like. But I will move forward. If you guys have something, by all means, jump in, shoot me a chat, and I will do my best to answer. So self-harm, it's similar to substance use in that it is a coping skill. Most of the clients that I have who self-harm, the self-harming is actually in no way, shape, or form a desire to die. It's actually their last ditch effort to live and to want to live. Is the thing that's keeping them alive and keeping them from acting on suicidal thoughts. And so self-harm has oftentimes been seen as a suicidal act, and it is not. It's even considered a para-suicidal act, and it really isn't. It's not really, or it's not connected to suicide in terms of wanting to act on it. It is actually an anti-suicide. Um, the problem with it is that just like with substance, it's become reliant and or addicted to the behavior. They have to continue to self-harm in order for them to manage their emotions and manage their feelings. Um, all these strategies are strategies for both professionals and for parents. finding a way for your child to rebel in a different way, finding a way to talk with them about substances without just saying you shall not use, right? Really seeking to first understand why is it that they use, what are the values that they have, what are the goals they have in life, and then just simply reflecting back to them, is this really in line with what you're trying to do? If you want to be a basketball player, how does substance use affect that? And in many cases, it might not affect it in some major way. They may have idols or stars of their different respective games that use on a regular basis. And so you can't always rely on those kind of things, but it's looking at the specific things, right? If they are looking to avoid things, right? It's helping your child, or maybe this is even yourself, right? Where are the cues that I'm running into or that my child is running into that are increasing their urges? Are there ways that we can avoid those cues? And again, some of them might be fairly drastic. You might need to move a school. You might need to get them enrolled somewhere, do an independent study or some other thing to get away from some of the cues that they're running into that are causing these urges, and increasing the accessibility of their substances. Um, One again that's really hard for both parents and for parents is helping them to burn a bridge. Um, Friends are sacrosanct to teenagers, and they are oftentimes more important to the teenager than the parent. And that's actually it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just how that people are. It's how we leave our family and create new families. Um, and so being able to help them though to recognize this is really the kind of friend that you want, and doing so from a place of curiosity, not judgment. It's not this is a bad friend. You shouldn't be friends with them. It's is this the kind of friend that you want? Is this how you want to be treated when you're around this person? How do you feel with them? And really being curious, and quite frankly, what's so good about this person? I have heard from a lot of kids that I've worked with about their friends who have a hard time giving up, that these are some of the most loyal friends that they've ever had. That these friends have shown up for them in ways that others haven't. And when all we see the negative, you're giving my child or you're supporting my child in substance use, it's hard to see those good things. Glad that was helpful. I wanted to make sure I got over that and just provided that as a way to help tie those things in for you, because uh, these are professional skills that I do use, and they are really powerful skills that can be used as well for parents. In my own parenting, I will tell you, um, the days I'm a better parent are the days that I use more of my therapy skills. The days I'm a less effective parent or I'm not as good a parent are the days that I use less of my therapy skills. Barring the question of how does that make you feel, because nobody likes that question. Anyway, as I was saying, it's not suicidal behavior. It's actually oftentimes an active act against suicide. And oftentimes the thing it is the very thing that's keeping them from acting on their suicidal urges. Um, when I have been able to express this to the clients that I've worked with, the relief on their face that comes across from, oh my God, you get it, is palpable. Um, Being able to understand this, because it is such a misunderstood thing. It is antithetical. Self-harm is antithetical to our most basic urges, right? Um, our our typical urge is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. When we self-harm, we are intentionally causing pain, which seems odd. It seems to be incongruent that we are now seeking out pain. Um, at different points, people have thought that there was like a miswiring in the brain and they derive pleasure from pain. It's really not that. It's this pain is something that's more manageable for them than the pain that they are experiencing elsewhere. Um, there's a clip from a really old movie. that we're probably all old enough to remember called Major Payne. And he is dealing with somebody who had their leg broken or whatever, and he's like, "Do you want me to you want me to help you take your pain off of that?" Like, yes, and he breaks the guy's finger, and he's like, "Why did you do that? Not thinking about your leg anymore, are you?" And that's what we do. And so these kids are inflicting pain on themselves so that they can bring their mind off of the other pain that they're experiencing. So strategies similar to substance use, we want to identify alternative ways to cope and meet the function of the behavior. We need to shift or focus on decreasing harm prior to them being willing to be able to be fully abstinent. So it might be finding again replacement behaviors. It might be working on cutting less or self-harming less. It might be finding other ways to get the biochemical release that comes up. I had a parent share with me before that their child admitted to watching videos of like fights and other things, and they were really kind of weirded out by this, and they weren't sure what the heck was going on with that. And I shared with them, well, biochemically, they're looking for adrenaline. Think about what you feel when you watch those fights, or and yeah, you don't like the feeling, but for teenage boys, that could be the thing that they're actually looking for. So sometimes it's about, even trying to figure out like biochemically what's going on, and is there something that this is getting them. When we are hurt, our brain fires off endorphins and dopamine. If we are suffering from depression and we are experiencing something called anhedonia, a lack of pleasure, the endorphins and the dopamine that light up the pleasure center of our brain, it's like a water drop in the middle of a drought, right? Just that parched tongue, right? And just getting that one drop of water on it. And it doesn't do a whole lot, but it does something, right? And it becomes this major thing. So being able to find ways to bring in and find other ways to cope with it or to decrease it. For a lot of my clients, I actually encourage them, just like with their substance use, I want you to actually be more aware of your cutting. And so it's when you're cutting or self-harming, rather than just kind of blanking out or going mindless, I want you to, if you're going to choose to do it, I want you to focus all your attention on it. And I want you to be as mindful as you can be as you're doing it. And I want to see, does it take as many cuts? Does it take as deep a cuts? What are the things that may be being changed that might actually be reducing the harm? And so just understanding those kind of things. I know that was pretty brief on the cutting and everything else, but again, it is a behavior that is very similar to substance use, and that has a lot of the same kind of ties. And so it really is kind of getting your head wrapped around that's there. So, are there any questions about substance use, self-harming behavior, or anything else like that? There's nothing else. There is a evaluation that I would really like you guys to fill out. This is a um, program that is funded by a grant called MHSA, and we need to get feedback and those kind of things as part of getting this grant to be able to provide this further into the future. In terms of what the future looks like for this program, we do have another program that we are going to be doing again in the spring. The dates are to be determined. I'll also be sending out a little questionnaire to everybody who signed up, just to kind of ask what would get people more to be able to show up and to be able to attend. I don't know if there's an issue with time of day or if we need to revamp the topics, or quite frankly, if we just need to make time for in person and have a spot for people to be able to go. But I just want to be able to kind of brainstorm how to get more involvement and really get this information out there. I will be posting this video like all the other ones online so that if you missed something, if you want to hear something again, you can do that. And for all this, you are actually, you feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions that come up with anything else that's going on. And I am very happy to answer whatever questions I can. If I do think that's something that really does require a little bit more in-depth understanding or assessment, I may refer you back to a mental health professional or your doctor. But I will do my very best to share what expertise I can and hopefully benefit you guys. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time. And again, if you can please fill out the evaluation, I appreciate that. And I will keep you all updated on what the plans are for future sessions. Thank you.